Ladies and gents, welcome back to the channel. Now I'm really pleased that you guys are taking the time to watch the videos. Hopefully you're learning something, hopefully you're enjoying them. I enjoy making them. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, it helps me out massively. Now, today's session, we're at a new venue. This is called Phoebe's, this lake. It's just outside Melton Mowbray, Leicestershire, and this is my first visit to the venue. And looking at the colour of the water's really coloured, and even at this time of year, that tells me there's plenty of fish moving around. So, hopefully, my tip-off is correct. I've come on today with a really simple approach. I think on these smaller venues, these more enclosed venues, bomb fishing when the water's cold is a really nice way of feeling your way into the session and a really nice way of controlling what's going on in front of you. You don't spoil the water in front of you too much. So, bomb fishing is the way to go for me today. I've got a bag of pellets with me, so hook bait and feed, that's sorted. If I need to feed a little bit of bait over the top later on in the session, that's what I'll do. But to start with, I just want to start by casting around a single hook bait and just see if I can locate some fish. So let me talk to you about fish location and where my first cast is going to be. Well, ladies and gents, I'm raring to go, but before I cast out, I want to just talk you through my thinking behind where I'm going to make my first cast. So, as you can see the peg I'm faced with today, I've got an island to my left, a bit of open water to my right, and I've got a lovely little stanchion, sort of like pontoon arrangement straight in front of me. Now, what I've not done when I've got to my peg is start casting around with a bomb and no hook bait on. I've left all that water nice and quiet in front of me. The last thing I want to do is start casting around, because all that's going to do is push those fish out of the area. They might not come back at all. What I want to do is make my first cast count. So I'm looking at that island. I'm guessing it's going to be 2 foot deep. I think that's just a little bit too shallow, especially early on in the session. Maybe later on in the day, the fish might push into that shallow water, but I think early on, it's going to be a little bit too shallow. I'm looking at that pontoon in front of me, and it's just like a magnet to me. I reckon it's going to be, what, 3 foot, 4 foot deep up against that pontoon, just off the island. Obviously, I think that's going to be an ideal place to start. So that's going to be my starting point, my starting cast. Now let's just talk about the kit I'm using before I cast out. So hook length wise, I've got a hook length there. It's 12 inches of 018. I've got a size 16 hook. I've tied a bait band onto the hair, knotless knot style, and that's housing an 8mm pellet. Really simple fishing this is. I've got a lead arrangement which is running, so running weight there, that's 15 grams, so it's going to make a really nice plop as it enters the water. And hopefully you can see there, I'm using the link from a snap link swivel arrangement. I've cut the swivel off, and I like to use these little links. Firstly, they tuck into the lead really nice and neatly, and secondly, if I want to change the hook length, it's so quick and easy. Even, you know, my fingers are girls' fingers, but even if you've got big chunky sausage fingers, you can change the hook length so fast with those. Main line, I'm using a 5-pound main line, something nice and robust, and rod arrangement, 10 foot, a standard 10 foot commercial carp feeder rod. You know, something that bends right through, something that's going to absorb the lunges of all those carp. You're not going to pull out the fish when you get them close to the net. 10 foot is about the right length in my opinion for 90% of your commercial fishery work. Right, let's chuck him out. I reckon just a couple of foot to the right of that pontoon is the place to go, and we'll see if we can get a bite. Tell you what folks, I've not lost it. Straight on the money that was. Right, take my time, set the tip. I'm going to use the stopwatch so I don't lose track of time. And what I'm going to do is, just as if I was fishing feeder or bomb on any venue, is I'm going to set the tip quite slack. A fish in this venue, hopefully, is going to tow my rod in when we do find the fish. But what I want to do is spot those little line bites. I want to see where the fish are. I want to try and locate them early on in the session. And spotting those line bites is going to be key for that. So by setting your tip slack, you just see a few more indications. The tip's able to move around a little bit more and you'll be able to spot those fish bumping into your line. I'm hoping we get a fish first chuck because obviously it looks superb out there, but if we don't get one first chuck, hopefully a few liners and indications on the tip might tell us where to cast next. I'm guessing if we don't get any line bites here, next move is maybe to cast slightly more into open water. Looking at the colour of this lake, I'm sure there's plenty of fish feeding, so I'm guessing later on in the day we'll have a chance to feed a little bit of bait up against the island I'm looking at, try and get some fish into shallower water where they're easy to catch. And I've started on a hook length of probably a foot in length, but I'm guessing that if we do start loose feeding a bit of bait and casting towards that island, I don't want to hook up, and obviously I want the fish to hook themselves against that lead arrangement, so probably shortening that hook length right down to maybe even like 4 inch, maybe just using one of my method feeder hook lengths that's 4 inch in length, could be the way to go. But I'm happy enough to start with. Let's see what response we get on this first chuck. It's always good to get an indication or maybe even a fish on the first cast. And I'm planning on leaving this maybe 8 or 10 minutes before a recast. But I'm hoping it tries to disappear into the lake before that. So while we wait for a bite, let's just talk about the bait I've got with me today. I brought with me one bait today, and looking at the colour of the water, I think I've hit it about right. I've got with me a bag of pellets. I've kept things really simple. These are the Swim Stim F1 pellets, full of smell, full of flavour. And I think in coloured water, those fish have got to be hunting and looking for food using smell rather than vision. Surely they can't see much further than a foot in front of them in this colour of water, so I think smell is the way to go. And these pellets have got a beautiful smell to them. I'm hoping they're going to work. They're 8mm, which means I can catapult them out, keep them nicely grouped, I can get them to where I need them to go. And also, from what I've been told, the size of fish in here sort of is like 2 to 10 pound. And I think 8mm pellets are the perfect size for that size of fish. So there we go, folks. 8 minutes on the stopwatch. I'm pleased I left it in for a little bit longer than I initially thought I was going to leave it in. But we've got a fish. It feels a bit of a nodder as well, so hopefully it's a decent fish. A little tiny line bite, and then the tip towed round, so he's a decent fish. Nice start anyway. The only disappointing part about that last cast was the lack of line bites. I was expecting a few more little indications and liners, but it's a fish on the end, which is what matters. Fantastic start. Nice common, probably £4 maybe. There's the pellet, look, single pellet. Let's hold him up for you. Let's see if we can hold him up. Beautiful fish. Hopefully there's a few more of those. Now I'm happy to cast back in the same spot again because we've had a fish. Just a little bit disappointed that we didn't get as many indications as I wanted really. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a bit of a brave decision. There's another couple of anglers on the lake and they're feeding a bit of bait and they are catching some fish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the catapult out and I'm going to start feeding a little bit of bait. just to the left of that pontoon, with a view to maybe casting on it in a little while. So I'm going to cast this back out in front of that pontoon. Maybe wait for this wind to drop a little bit. And then, there you go, perfect. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start feeding a little bit of bait, probably 3 or 4 metres to the left of where I'm casting, up against the island. Just try and make something happen. It shouldn't affect what I'm doing with where I've just cast, but hopefully it'll just give me somewhere to cast as a second swim, a bit more of a positive swim. So I'm not going to go mad. I'm just going to give it 1 or 2 pellets every now and again, just to make a bit of a rattle on the surface. I'm going to try and group them nicely as well. The wind's sort of right to left, but also off my back, so it's a little bit easier to ping them out there. I'm just going to, every now and again, flick a few pellets out there. So that's 6 pellets out there, and I reckon every 30 seconds or so, just maybe put in a couple of pellets, just to make that rattle on the surface and create a nice little area of food. So guys and girls, I'm a little bit disappointed with the amount of indications I've had. I expected maybe a few liners off the edge of that pontoon, but I've had nothing. I've had obviously that 1 fish, but next couple of chucks, just no indications whatsoever. But I've been feeding a little bit of bait. There's other anglers, as I say, on the lake, and they're catching a few fish. Not loads, but just the odd fish, and I feel like they're feeding a bit more than me. So I've been feeding a bit of that bait towards that island, and I think it's worth having a cast. I know it's quite early on in the session, but I'm itching to have a cast just where I've been feeding that bait. Tell you what, it doesn't feel that shallow there. It feels probably maybe 3 foot deep up against that island. Got a little bit of room to go a bit closer as well. That's a couple of foot away from that island there. So let's just see if we can get any indications where we've fed some bait. It's not the end of the world if we don't, because we've still got other water to explore, but I think if we can get bites where we've fed a bit of bait earlier on in the session, I think that might set us up for the rest of the day. So all I've been doing, as I say that, one just jumped out at the edge of that pontoon. It's the first fish I've seen all day, and he's just jumped out at the edge of that pontoon. But I've been feeding, just jumped out again. I've been feeding 1 or 2 pellets, sort of every 30 seconds or a minute, just feeding 1 or 2 pellets, just to create a little bit of noise on the surface, just make something happen in the swim. And you've got to remember, the water's freezing cold. I know these fish apparently are still pretty active, but you can easily overfeed the fish. So just 1 or 2 pellets is enough to create a little hot spot in the swim. And if I do struggle to get bites where I've fed a little bit of bait, as I say, I've got to the left still to explore, casting down that island, and also I've got a lot of open water to my right, and that could well be worth having a go at. But the fact that that fish has just jumped out right where I've been fishing really gives me some confidence. It didn't look a small fish either. So hopefully we can get a few bites and feed a bit of bait, because then it feels like you're in control rather than having to chase the fish around all over the place. Absolute toe round that was. So that is interesting, over the top of where we've been feeding. Feels like another nice fish as well. I mean, we're not getting fast bites in that we're not getting bites where the fish is taking it on the drop, or I feel that the fish is watching the bait fall. So if we start catching over the top of this loose feed, I think my next move, because I don't want to snag up to the island either, and I want to increase the bolt effect on this rig I'm using, is to shorten that hook length down. I've got some 4-inch hook lengths, sort of thing that you'd use for method feeder fishing. So I think maybe putting one of those on could just help us a little bit. I always feel that with sort of a foot hook length, the fish can get away with it a little bit more. He doesn't feel the lead as he picks up the hook bait as fast. So I always feel a shorter hook length's a little bit better. And obviously, because in this coloured water the fish aren't watching the bait fall, we're not getting any advantage from that longer hook length. So I think a 4-inch hook length could be the way to go. Feels like a nice fish. He's plodding up and down. Cool, definitely active still. This is where a nice soft rod comes into play. When you've got the fish under your feet, take your time with your fish. Looks like a mirror this time. I've literally got no idea what the stocking's like. I had a quick chat with the owner when we got here, and he reckons there's all sorts in here. So look at that beautiful fish. Just slightly bigger than that first one. So there we go, the 4-inch hook length has done its job. Little drop back bite. Obviously he's hooked himself and the lead's been dislodged, and we've got a little drop back bite. Shows how direct the rig is, really, that does. I just wonder if, because the fish aren't moving around loads, still cold, I just wonder if that 12-inch hook length was just too much for them, and this little 4-incher is the way to go. Feels a nice fish. Another nice common. I don't know what the stocking's like. I had a quick chat to the owner and he reckons there's all sorts in here. Again, take my time with the fish. There he is. Cracking fish. I won't be disappointed if they're all like that today, but let's hope we catch a couple of better fish. So there we go, little 4-inch hook length, look. Hold him up for you. Cracking little fish. Don't want to hold him too high. A beautiful little fish. Probably, I don't know, 3.5, 4 pound. But we're getting bites now. And when a lot of people would probably stay at home because it's too cold, they'd be sitting in front of the fire with their feet up. We're out and we're catching a few fish, so I'm happy. And more importantly, that was over the feed, which tells me that we can have a little bit of a control now over the session. So let's see if we can plop it back in the same spot. That'll do. We've had a couple of little indications on that line as well, which obviously prompted me to put the short hook length on. So things could be happening. You know, we might have attracted a few fish into that area. Like I say, it's not a lot of bait, just 1 and 2 pellets every now and again. Just make a bit of attraction. And let's see if we can have a nice day. Well folks, time's getting on a little bit now, but let me tell you what we've learnt from the day. The short hook length, switching to that short hook length, has transformed the day, that's for sure. We've had a brilliant little session. Every fish nailed on that little 4-inch hook length. And I just wonder, as I said earlier, I wonder if they were getting away with it a little bit with that longer hook length. But the other thing that I think has been massively important today, just from what we found out early on, is the fact that these fish want a bit of food. And you know what? I just think we're at that time of year where we're not quite ready for single baits yet. Obviously, we caught that early fish on a single bait, but that was the only fish. And then we've had a fantastic session where we've fed a bit of bait. So it's not a case of piling it in, but it's also not a case of just sitting there doing nothing with one single bait out there. So, you know, if you do get a chance to get out on the bank over the next couple of weeks or so, don't forget to feed a little bit of bait. Just 1 or 2 pellets, keep them going in, and hopefully you have a nice day. I think that's a cracking little fish to end on. I'll fish on till dark, knowing me, so I'll probably give it another half an hour. So, until next time folks, tight lines.